Kutvach, learning is a chus for shlema filan chaya basarach, and as a chus for the neshama of Meir and Elazar. On Daf Nun Zayin Amid Beis, really a little bit in the middle of the Gemara. We're getting to now to the interesting part. We just said about even though we find that there's a din of shmutas yarach ba'oif is treifa, but you could sometimes find a way that it could survive by doing. We said Rav Shimon ben Chalifta came up with an eitzah. He made like a splint for it. So now we're going to talk about Rav Shimon ben Chalifta. This is 5 lines down in the wide lines. Rav Shimon ben Chalifta was an asken b'dvarim. It doesn't mean an asken gets featured in the newspapers. It's an asken. He liked to check things out for himself. He believed in the empiric method of scientific observation. You try it out. And he did something to try to demonstrate the incorrectness of Rav Yehuda's shita. Rav Yehuda Aimer, in nitla hanoitza psula. If the down of a bird is taken, it's puzzle, meaning because it's not going to be able to survive. The Tanagolis Haisalai Rav Shimon ben Chalaf, they had a chicken. They took off the down from it. He put it into an oven. He put on like an apron that they used to use for copper workers that collected copper fillings, and it was warm. So he put it in an oven, and he put a warm blanket, a warm covering over it. It grew new feathers that were thicker than the original ones. So he wanted to prove that even though a bird has lost its down, it can regenerate. In fact, the Yehuda Trefa Shaveches. Maybe if Yehuda holds that it's. I'm sorry. Maybe if Yehuda holds that it sometimes a trefa can become better, but it doesn't take away from the fact that it's a trefa and it's going to die. Zaknamar imke b'midi demitra for hagdila imke b'midi demitra for hagdila knafayim hachroinim yoysim narishonim. It wouldn't have been such a thing that it would be mishabeach. It would become better, even if you hold that something that's a trefa can improve. It means it can improve in ancillary areas, but it can improve in that thing which became a trefa. And over here, the thing that made it a trefa was the loss of the down. So once that returned, that blew a hole in the whole theory. My Eisken Bidvarim. Laura says you thought you saw that Shimon Chalafta was an experimenter. I'm going to show you where did he get his reputation from? Amr of Mesharshia, the Siv, Lech el Nemola, go to the ant, Eitzel Ra'a Darka, V'chacham Asher Ein Lo Kotzen. The ant is a this is Mishlei. The Chacham Shloim is giving an eitzah. Go to the Chacham and see that it's how smart it is. Asher ein lo kotzen shoiter u'moishel. It has no chief and no ruler and no king. Tachem b'kayetz lachma. It prepares its bread in the summer, and in the winter it eats it without fighting amongst themselves. So he wanted to show that there's such a thing as. It's very, very communist type of idea. He says you could go. Shlomo HaMelech says, "Go look at the ant. That even though there's no ruler, they still manage to work amongst themselves without corruption. Even though we don't find this amongst humans, but Shlomo HaMelech was saying, I guess if you're a Shomer Torah mitzvahs, then you're capable of doing this." Amar Ezel Echsi Ivadi Hu Deleslu Malka. So Rav Shimon Chalafta was suspicious of this concept that the ants don't have a ruler. Also, B'tkufas Tamas, he went in the hot summer. Parsel Glima Kina de Shumshini. He put a covering over their anthill. Nafak Asachad Minayu. One of the ant scouts came out. Esnach Be Simna. Shimon Chalafta put a simon on that ant that stuck its nose out. Ol amalahu nafal tula. He went, the ant went back and told the other ants, the shade has come. It's already nightfall. You don't have to worry about the heat. Ba'asu dalya ba'asu. So all the ants came out. Dalya glima. So at that point, Shimra Tachlafta pulled the rug out under from that scout, and he took away the shade. Nafal Shimsha Naflu Allah. The sun fell down on the ants, the kotley, and it killed them. I'm sorry, Naflu Shimsha, Naflu Allah the kotley. All the other ants jumped on this ant who had, in their minds, given false information that it was already night and they didn't have to worry about the sun. Then they killed him for giving bad info. Amar Shmami no less luhu malka. So you could see from this that they don't have a king. The islu harmona, the malka loyli boy. If there was a king, wouldn't they have to get permission from the king before killing? Couldn't have killed them so quickly. Sorry. So from the fact that they were able to kill him on the spot, nice that there's no king. Amali Ravacha Brei the Rav Ravashi. The Dilma Malka Habavadayu says maybe the king was right there and they asked him, he gave the nod to kill him on the spot. Inamar Hamana the Malka Havanakiti. Or else maybe they had a rule that whenever someone does something like this, they can kill him. Inami bein Malka Malka Hava, maybe they were in between kings. When there's no king, everyone does as they please. So Rav Shimon bar Tachlafta wanted to slug up the raya of Shlomo HaMelech, but in the end you have to come up, you have to be Saimach on Shlomo HaMelech in Mishlei that he said this. Which is, the Mefarshim asked a very good question, that Shlomo HaMelech said, go look at the Nemala. So why are you criticizing Rav Shimon bar Tachlafta for doing as he was instructed? Amar Rav Huna. Similar treifa Yud Beis Chaydish. Rav Huna said the simon for a treifa. So now we're done with the fun part of today's festivities. So we're talking about the din of a treifa generally. Now the Gemara is talking about what is the simon of a treifa. We've generally been talking about how either treifa. We've talked about how whether a treifa can live or a treifa can't live. So if you say a treifa can live, it means it can live for over up to a year. And if you hold it can't, then it means can't live even that long. Our Rav Huna, similar treifa Yud Beis Chaydish. Rav Huna says the simon of a treifa, that means even if everything else indicates that it's a treifa, but if it lives for 12 months, that shows it's not a treifa. Where it's a suffix treifa. Zok the Gemara, Meisvei, similar treifa. Kol she'en yoledes. The Tanna Kama says in this brayso that the simon for a treifa is if it can't give birth. That's an additional simon because obviously it's only for females, not for males. Rav Shimon Gamliel Omer, Mishaveches v'heleches v'yadua shehi kshera. Misnava v'heleches v'yadua shehi treifa. Rav Shimon Gamliel says you look at the trend. If it's improving, then you know it's kosher. If it's getting worse, then you know it's a treifa. That's Rav Shimon Gamliel's simon. Rabbi Omer, similar treifa shloishim yom. Rabbi is chaylik, he says it's 30 days. If it survives 30 days, that tells you that the suffix treifa is viable and it's not going to die. Amru loy v'aloi harba miskayem shteim u'shloisha yomim shan shtaim shalosh shanim. We find many treifas that can live for 2 to 3 years. So Gemara Tanohi, Ein Chanami. Well, but in any case, we didn't find Amanda Amar who said the Rav Huna shita of a year. We saw about Yeledes and Mishabeches v'Yeleches, then we saw 30 days. So where did Rav Huna come from if all the Tanaim gave different shitas? So the Gemara says there's hold on a second. So, um, there's another third Manda Amar, a third Tana that Rav Huna is being Saimach on. The Tanya. Ubal Achi Yesh Benekav Echad Aruch. This is talking about the Dinei Tuma that we've come across a number of times, that a although you generally need a whole goof to be metama in an oil, unlike a tumas nega, but from a skeleton you could have a whole skeleton, or you could have, I believe, the skull or the spine. So, but if you're missing part of the gulgoilas, you're missing part of the skull, that takes away from that. Then if you have the spine and the skull, so if you miss, how much do you have to be missing from the gulgoilas, from the skull, in order to make it that it's not metama? So we say, if you have one long hole, or even a bunch of holes, they are mitzdarf to be metama. Lamole mekadeach, to be the size of a screw hole. That means when they would drill, the size of the hole that they would drill, that was the shear to make it that it's no longer a full skull. Amar Rav Yossi ben Hamashulam Maisa be'imvul. There was a story in Imvul ve'echad she'nivchasal galgaltoi, that he got a hole in his skull. V'asol a chidik shel kruya. They made him a patch made out of dried gourd, v'chaya, and he lived. Amalei Rav Shimon Laza misham raya. Rav Shimon Laza answered that, how is that a raya that a person can live with a hole in his skull? It was during the sun. As soon as it became cold, that was no longer a helpful patch. The patch didn't work anymore, and he died in the cold. So now we're seeing two things. First of all, we're seeing the source over here for the Yud Beis Chaydish. The reason for Yud Beis Chaydish is because the treifa dies over the course of, according to this Manda Amar, over the course of Yud Beis Chaydish, you have all variations of climates. Then, if he survives all of them, then he's not a treifa. The variable is if different climates can affect him differently. So until he's gone through all of them, we don't know that he's not a treifa. But since he's saying so that is the Manda Amar that seems to hold that you need 12 months. Amar Rav Acha bar Yaakov halacha treifa yeledes. The halacha is that a treifa can give birth, unlike the Tanakam of this brisa, u'mishabechas, and it can improve, unlike Rav Shimon Gamliel in this brisa. So that's Rav Acha bar Yaakov shita. Amar Ameimer. We have two versions of Ameimer on the next Amud. The first one, so it's going to depend on whether we hold, like what Rabbi Yaakov just paskin, whether a treifa can give birth. So the first sheet is going to go, I think, in the Manda Amar that a treifa can give birth. Amar Ameimer, Hani Bei the treifa. These eggs of a bird, a female bird that gave birth, and then the bird became a treifa. So while it was after it fertilized the eggs were already inside the hen, and then it got a hole. She got a hole in her trachea or in her esophagus. Shichla kama asira. The first eggs that are born from that hen are going to be aser because they're going to be treifa. As Rashi says, Shilchakam balaz pushta. Oisen shahayu b'mei b'shas nitfa kulan asuras the ober yerach imohu the imay nitrafa. So just like the mother became a treifa from getting a hole in her esophagus, that tarfus also applies to the egg inside the mother because of the din of ober yerach imay. Mikan ve'elach, any subsequent clutches of eggs, havale zev is egayrim. At that point, there are two two parents. There's the hen that's a treifa, but there's also the rooster that's healthy. Umutter. Zev Zegoyrim is mutter. Since you have one healthy participant and one non-healthy, it's going to be mutter. While it's not the same thing as when the first egg, because that egg itself became a treifa. The tarfus, the action that caused it to become a treifa, also applied to the egg. Eisvei Rav Ashi la'amema. B'shavim ebeis treifa she'asura. They both agree by a beya of a treifa that it's also nolda b'isa, because it was nolda b'isa. We're not being mechalik between the first batch and the second batch. It's saying an egg that was born to a treifa mother is also. So that's talking about where it was born without being fertilized. There was no rooster involved, which are the vast majority of eggs that are born. So therefore, there's no zev geirim. It's not one iser and one heter. It's all the iser, and therefore it's awesome. Why do you have to say it's talking about an unfertilized egg? Why can't we talk about a fertilized egg? But even so, it's also because it was the first batch from the one that became treifa. Im king godla gomra mi baile. Why does it say it wasn't godla b'isser? It was gomra. It was born b'isser, right? It became usser when the mother became a treifa. Elahad Tna. Vlad treifa, the child of a treifa, should not be brought on the mizbeach. It's a psul to be brought on the mizbeach. Yeshua aimer yikarev. Yeshua says it can be brought. But my kamiflgi, what's the case that they're arguing about? We're talking about where the mother of this Vlad became a treifa, and then it gave birth to this animal after it became a treifa. Rebbe Eliezer says, since both there's two participants, even though the father was mutter, since the mother's a treifa, that also apostles the Vlad. Yeshua holds, like we said on the top of the summit, by the second egg coming from the treifa chicken, that since there are two contributors, since one is mutter, it's also mutter. If that's the case, why are we saying with Afka Legabi whether to use it for a carbon? Let's just say whether you could eat it or not, whether it's a treifa for eating. It's coming to tell you that according to Yeshua, not just is it not a treifa, but it's even able to be eaten b'pashtus with it can even be brought as a carbon. The liflagula hedged ladicha kaichader Eliezer. Why don't we say talking about a hedged and say that you can't even eat it because it's a treifa according to Eliezer? I feel hedged nami aser kayach that tera adiflay. Because it's better to tell you the kayach that tera. When we say the kayach the surah the chiddush of aser, one can always say that we're just being machmer. When we say tam giz mutter, that's it's more of a chiddush to say that it's mutter. The Gemara fears and everyone will agree by a beya of a treifa that is also where it comes from an unfertilized egg, the chad gairim, who in that case there's only one gairim. Now obviously this entire preceding Gemara was based, like we said, on the idea that a treifa could give birth, right? We're talking about a treifa that's giving birth to eggs and a treifa that's giving birth to Vlad. So, but if you hold that the treifa can't give birth, this whole Gemara didn't make any sense. So therefore, Rav Acha Savala Rav Acha bar Yaakov Masalei L'Damei Mekadei Amar. Rav Acha holds like Rav Acha bar Yaakov, who had paskin that a treifa can give birth, and therefore he was able to learn the Gemara like this. Ravina Loi Savala Rav Acha bar Yaakov. He does not agree. He holds a treifa cannot give birth. He has a whole different version of Ameir. Amar Ameir. Hani Bey, the Suffolk treifa. These Bey is not of a treifa, but of a Suffolk treifa. The Shichla Kama the first batch that they give birth to. Mashinale, you wait. Ihadra bitana, if the chicken goes and give birth to more eggs, sharian, it's mutter because you know that this mother was not a suffix, it was a vade, not a treifa, because otherwise it couldn't have given birth, couldn't have laid more eggs. Beloy asirin, and if not, it's also misafik. Esver Ravashi Lamema Moidim Veis Treifa Shasura. We said that the Moida Beis Treifa that it's awesome. They should get the Beiser. How could that be? How could it be Godla Beiser, a Beis Treifa? There's no such thing as a Beis Treifa. A Treifa is not able to give birth. Amalei Hasam b'deshikla Kama. That's talking about where the mother, the hen, had already produced the egg, and then it became a treifa before it laid the egg. So that's the reason why it was able to produce an egg. In King, Godla Gomer mibayale. In that case, the lashon of Godla is incorrect. It's Gomer because it was already there. It's like, come on, Tni Gomra, in a Chanami, change the lashon to Gomer. In fact, the Mara lahaditnan. The lad treifa, but as I'm a lo yikarv legabe mizbech. Yeshua I'm yikarv. V'may mufidi. The she'ivra l'b'sayf nitrifa. According to this man, the Amr, right, we're saying that a treifa cannot give birth. There's no such thing as tarfa l'b'sayf ivra, so it has to be she'ivra l'b'sayf nitrifa. But as a savar, so then what's the machlokes about? If it was already ma'ober before it became a treifa, or as a savar over yerachimahu. He holds over yerachimahu, like we said on the top of the Amr, and that's therefore the vlad will also be a treifa. Yeshua Sava over la berachimahu. He disagrees. Therefore, he says it remains kosher. Let's have the same question. So that's the same shagvatayil we had before. And the Gemara again fears the end of Amemer, and there will certainly be moida by a beya of a treifa shasura. What is that? But the shichla kama. That's talking about obviously where it already was mubaris, that the egg was already there before it became a treifa, and it's talking about the first batch. My timer, gufahi. By the first batch, that's part of the egg is actually part of the body of the mother. So therefore we say uber yerachimahu, and that therefore becomes possible as in spite of the fact that right, Rabbi Yeshua will agree here in this case, even though he holds b'derech klal that ober lav yerachimehu, but the egg is different, which is opposite the way we would think about it. We would think a fetus without the shell is more connected, but he says no, the egg is really part of the mother, whereas a fetus has more independent vitality. By a zachar, you have to wait 12 months. You don't have this way of testing if it has a vlad. But nekeva kol sheni yeledis. And nekeva additionally, as long as it's not yeledis, if it's yeledis, that proves that a suffix treif is not really a treif. Amr Rafuna kol beria she'ein by etzem einim iskayim yud beis chaydish. He says any invertebrate, any animal does not have bones. It's not just a spine, but any bones cannot live more than 12 months. That's the rule. There's no worms that live more than 12 months. Amra Papa Shmami Rav Huna Adam Shmuel Kishtus shehetliya be'evia asura. A cucumber that got worms while it was attached to the ground is awesome. This comes from the pasuk that says Kol hasheretz asheretz alaretz sheketzu lo yeyochel, that a sheretz, while it's attached to the ground, the sheretz that's created while something is attached to the ground is awesome. So the worms inside of a cucumber while it's attached to the ground, those shrotzim were created. This is according to the concept that shrotzim are created spontaneous reproduction from inside of the vegetable. So, but that's only if they're connected to the ground. If they're not connected to the ground, they are not going to aser. They're not going to be aser to eat as a sheretz. Right, so all these bugs and things that we are scared of, those are only if they grew. First of all, if they come from parents, or if they grew on the ground. Hani tamri v'kada. So if you have dates in a kli that have worms in them, lebasa tresa yarchi shasa sharian. If you wait 12 months, whatever bugs you find in there are not going to be aser, because you don't know if the bugs came when they were attached or not. You wait for 12 months, because since we know the rule is that they can't survive more than 12 months, anything that came afterwards grew from within the date and therefore does not have the din to be aser as a sheretz. Amar Rav, less baka bar yuma, the less didva bashasa. There's no such thing as a 1-day-old gnat, and there's no fly that lives for a year. I guess that's the longest they could live. Amler papala abaya, Rami inchi, shav shni imra biksa mevaka. The amrle chazisa lebar mechuza, the sacha b'maya v'salak. Because this is talking about a jealous wife. There was for 7 years, this gnat. We just said a gnat can only live for 1 day. It says this gnat kept away from her husband for 7 years. She said this husband saw Obama Chuza was an especially fat person, that he washed himself in water and he came out and he wrapped himself in cloaks. And the gnat went and sucked his blood, and he ate from him, and he didn't tell me. That means there was plenty there to share, and my husband refused to share, so therefore she kept away from him for 7 years. The Gemara says, how could there be such a story if the gnat only lives for 1 day? How could the gnat say for 7 years? That they say that a gnat has a 60 mana stinger, a metal stinger that's 60 mana long. That's how hard it stings. Is there such a thing? There's no such thing as a gnat that weighs even 1 mana. It weighs nothing. So how can you talk about 60 mana? Ella b'mani didu, hachanami b'shani didu. When we say it weighs 60 mana, it means in the scale of a gnat, 60 mana or 60% of it, it's all stinger. That's what it is. So say that we say 7 years, it means 7 years in the life cycle of a gnat. It doesn't mean 7 actual years. Tan Hassan, behema balas he reglayim, oisha ein la ela shalish harezemum. A behema that has 5 feet, or that only has 3, that's a mum. Legabi a bechar, if it's a balmum, you could eat it without bringing it as a carbon. That's only if it's missing or extra on its forehands. But then if it's by the legs, then it's not just a balmum, but it's also a treif. Treif nami ham. My timer, kol yas kenotel dami. Even if there's extra, when you have double, you take away both of them. Ahi chiyusa. There was this animal, the Havala Tarta Sanya Devi, that had 2 of these Sanya Devi. We had this. This is the hated by wolves. It was a very bitter part, like a piece of an extra gallbladder type of thing, something that hangs off the gallbladder, very distasteful. But it had double of it. Aisula Ravina. The tarfa. Ravina said it's treifa. Because Ravuna says if something has double, it's as if it's missing, and if this is missing, it's a treifa. If the 2 Sini Sanya Divi, these two organs are next to each other, then it's kosher because it's as if they're only one. Hahi gufsa, the hava nafkum kisi lohevlila. There was a like a tube of flesh, a valve that went from the Beit Kasi, which is the base kaisis, which is the second of a ruminant's four stomachs, that went to the third. I think Rashi said it was the omasis. They went to the third of the stomachs. So Ravashi lamitrafa. Ravashi wanted to say it's trefa. Amli of Huna. I'm sorry, excuse me. Hello? Yeah. Okay. Something. I'm sure he does. Yeah. Yeah, okay. So give me, let me go. Okay? I'm gonna go get him in a second. Thank you so much. Give me 1 second. I apologize. Apologize. Not easy to get a ride for your son back to Lakewood on Motzei Shabbos. You got to do what you got to do. Okay. So he had this tube, and Rashi wanted to Rashi. Am I up to the right place?
Okay. Ahi Gupta.
Ahu Gufta, right? Oh, right. There's two of them, right? That's what I skipped one. Ahu Gufta have a nafkum v'kasil levlu. Savar Ravashi lemitrafa. Amli Ravhuna bar mar bar Chiyel Ravashi. Kolhani chiyuya brisa hachi islahu. This is very common in barnyard animals that they have this passageway and it doesn't negatively affect the lifespan of the animals. Hahu gufsa da have a ma'avrami beikasi lekarsa. There's a similar type of passageway. They went from the Bekesi to the Karsa, which I think was in the other direction. Sava Mar Baravashi Lachshure. He wanted to say it's kosher. Are they all things live the same? Just because there's there could be a passageway between one organ and the next doesn't mean that the next organ is the same thing. It depends. Some will kill it and some won't. Only where it's said, and where it's not, it's not. Heid Nosen Barshila, Rav Tavche de Tzipayr. Nosen Barshila was we've had him before, he was the head of the butchers in Tzipayr, Lefnei Rabbi, Al Shnei Bnei Me'ayim Hayotzim Na Behema, a behemoth that has two intestines coming out of it, Ke'echad. She Treifa, that it's a Treifa. U'kenegdem Ba'oif Ksher, Ba'oif it's kosher. Medva Mamurim Shiyotzim B'shnei Mekaimis. That's if the two intestines come to two separate ends, two separate exits. The Chullin ad ke'etzba ksher. But if they come to one place and they end, that means if the two intestines merge up to an etzba, it's kosher. What does that mean, ad ke'etzba? Pligi b'ravami ravasi. Chad amar hu hadi v'arvi. One means that they have to join within one etzba. Very short diversion. The other one says until even if it doesn't, they don't join together until the end. Then we understand what it means ad ke'etzba. It has to rejoin with an etzba. What does it mean ad ke'etzba? So Gemara ad ke'etzba l'melamata. It means that it has to be within etzba of the end of before the exit that it has to join. Once it gets within the etzba of the exit, then it's too late. We said if the down is removed, it's puzzle, it's a treifa. Amrav Yechanan Yehuda Rabbi Shmuel Amru Davar Echad. Yehuda had Amaran. We see that Yehuda says that the noitza, it's taken off its puzzle, it's a tray for Rabbi Shmuel, the Tnan. Rabbi Shmuel Eimer, Hanoitza mitzdar efes. The Rabbi Shmuel says that in order to have enough This is talking about legabe the din of pigel, that if you have to have, let's say, a kazayas that you eat, you're going to do shaloi lishma. I'm sorry, if you can do let's say the zrikas dam, I guess not the dam, but let's say if you have in mind to eat from the parts of the animal that are eaten, chutz l'zmani or chutz l'mkaimai, so he said the nutza could be mitzdarif, this down could be included. So you see that the nutza is considered part of the edible portions of the animal. Amarava dilmalahi. Akali kam Rav Yehuda hacha el inyan treifa delekali dimaganola. By legabi treifa, there's nothing that's protecting it. Avalin of guli karabonin spherely, but like as far as making it piggle, that he doesn't. So that means from the fact, the question is whether skin is be'etzem edible. So that's why Rabbi Shmuel said that it's considered to combine with the skin. But Rabbi Yehuda over here is saying it legabi the din of whether it's protecting, whether it's considered, the noitza is considered to be skin to protect. So he says, no, maybe the two things are not equal. Even though skin is edible and skin also protect, doesn't mean it necessarily follows through. So legabi treifa, maybe Yehuda says that it's treated as skin. Legabi treifa, that if you take it away, it doesn't protect. It's nothing to protect. He holds that the legabi pigel, it's not considered to be food. Maybe he says he considers it skin legabi pigel, that it's part of the food of the animal, the basar. But he holds it doesn't protect, and therefore losing it doesn't make it into a treifa. Okay, we'll stop over here. Have a good vach, yasher kayach. And we'll see you tomorrow morning.